Welcome back, and to shed more light on this historical visit, we're glad to be joined over the phone by Ambassador Ezzat, former assistant to the Foreign Minister. Good afternoon, Mr. Ambassador.
Good afternoon.
Ambassador Saad, some diplomats described this visit by the South Korean president to Egypt as a historical one, on all levels, of course. What's your comment and your take on that, sir?
Indeed, we may call it, as you just said. In fact, South Korea is one of our main partners in Asia since the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries in the mid-90s last century. And also, South Korea is looking at Egypt as a very influential country in its region and the world, and also as a force of peace and security. South Korea also appreciates the so many initiatives and the ideas that Egypt came with in connection with international security all over the world, including, of course, the Korean peninsula. Of course, when talking about South Korea and Egypt, we have to mention the visit of our President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in March 2016, which can be considered a turning point in our bilateral relations with South Korea.
Yes. Sir, what are the most important expected topics to be discussed during the visit?
Well, it seems that it is a very extensive agenda. I understand that it is a 3-day visit.
Yes.
And there will be, besides the summit between the two leaders, there will be a signing of many agreements and the business roundtable also on renewable energy and the eco-friendly industries. Among the agreements to be signed, for example, an agreement on cooperation between the two countries on the Taba nuclear power plant in Egypt. There will be also an agreement on cooperation in the field of electronic products. And according to the South Korean ambassador to Cairo, and I think it was also confirmed by the Ministry of Trade and the Industry, 90% of Egypt's exports on electronic products is done in cooperation with South Korea.
Yes.
Also, the two parties will sign an agreement on the development of railways, electric cars, and water desalination.
Yes.
On top of that, South Korea will lend Egypt a soft loan of $1 billion to finance different projects.
Yes.
So there is a lot during that visit.
Yes.
And of course, if we take into account the fact that South Korea is the world's 10th largest economy and also leading technological power, we can imagine how important for Egypt in particular at this time, while we are implementing a lot of huge projects all over the country. So South Korea represents a good partner in that.
Right. Mr. Ambassador, how far do you think bilateral ties were developed lately, especially after President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi took office?
As I just mentioned, it was actually a turning point. And you see, both countries are having the same approach when talking about foreign policy. As far as Egypt is concerned, Egypt is open to have good political relations with all countries, regardless its size, based on common interest and mutual benefits. Also, as the case with Korea as well, we respect the international law, the role of international organizations,
Yes.
the peaceful settlement of disputes, the non-interference in internal affairs, and all these principles we regard, we look at it as a very important limitations for the current international order. And that
Yes.
is also something that brings Egypt and South Korea together.
Yes, sir, the growth recorded during the last years in bilateral trade relations turned Egypt into South Korea's most significant commercial partner, specifically in the Middle East and Africa. Now, would you please tell us more about the fields of cooperation and investment between the two countries, and how can we further enhance trade ties between the two countries?
Well, I understand that, the vocational training and also the electronics, the agricultural products from the Egyptian side. I mean, if you look at the figures mentioned by the Ministry of Trade and Industry 2 days ago, it is promising. It is 1.8 billion. Or something like that, maybe with a little deficit in favor of South Korea. But this is, I presume that with the establishment of a working group, as I understood, a working group will be established to look into the possibility of having a free trade agreement between the two countries.
Yes.
So with more investments from the South Korean side to Egypt and the more interaction with what is going on in our country, I believe this will have a very good impact on the trade exchange at the end of the day.
Yes, sir, cooperation between Egypt and South Korea is not limited to political, economic, and commercial fields. It also extends to reach education and cultural activities. Now, would you please illustrate, highlighting the importance of culture in bridging the two countries?
Sure, I agree with you completely, because one of the pillars of our relations with South Korea is the cultural and civilizational weight of Egypt in this part of the world.
Yes.
Also, the Korean exports are working in Egypt in the field of in the field of excavation, restoration of antiquities in Upper Egypt. Besides all this, I think, as I said, South Korea has a unique experience in vocational training, and we have been able to profit from this experience since we established our bilateral relations in 1995.
Yes.
And in such a time, while we are transforming our government into electronic one, and we modernize our education system and things like that, I'm sure South Korea will be welcoming, cooperating with us in this.
Yes, well, I would like to thank you very much, Ambassador Ezzat Saad. Many thanks for your insight, sir.